¡Viva el socialismo! ¡Patria muerte! ¡Venceremos!
You're listening to Sons of Fidel on ANTICONQUISTA with Victor Coronado and Danny Shaw. Sons of Fidel is a platform for the voiceless and marginalized, oppressed and colonized peoples, the working class, Black and brown radicals, the LGBTQ community, and our allies in the struggle against imperialism. Please note, the views expressed by the hosts or guests of Sons of Fidel may not necessarily reflect the views of ANTICONQUISTA.
Go ahead, Victor.
Good evening, comrades. Good evening. How's everybody doing? Comrades, allies, and enemies. I am Victor Coronado, co-host of Sons of Fidel, alongside Professor Danny Shaw. Professor Shaw, how you feeling tonight?
Feel good. Just back from Haiti, so really ready to build and support the Haitian Comrades.
Absolutely. So tonight the focus is on Haiti, and we're going to go ahead and touch on a few things. I'm actually going to, tonight we're going to do something a little bit different in terms of the format. I will be, Professor Shaw will be acting almost as a guest. Obviously, Professor Shaw spent a lot of time in Haiti recently and in the past, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then obviously, Professor Shaw is a student of Haitian history. Professor Shaw, just to provide some context for the audience, I want to kind of go back and let's contextualize some of this, and we're going to bring it up to speed to what's happening today. Can you talk about what took place in Haiti between 1791 and 1804?
All right, yeah. You want to take it all the way back, which is important. Yeah, I mean, Haiti was the original Cuba. Haiti was the original Venezuela. You have the rebellions. You have the Macandal and the Boukman, the Maroons, the uprising in Haiti against French colonialism, against slavery. And in 1804, this revolt, this rebellion, led by Toussaint Louverture, led by Jean-Jacques Dessalines, led by so many fearless warrioresses and warriors, is successful. So, of course, the Haitian Revolution, like the Cuban Revolution today or the Sandinista Revolution, like any revolution, it incurred the absolute anger and resentment of the ruling powers of that day. The French Empire, the British, the U.S. was emerging still as a global empire, but of course there was already white supremacy and slavery in the U.S. So they feared Haiti, and I would say to understand what's transpiring as we speak in 2021, what's happened the past month in Haiti, we do have to take it back that far into Haitian history, and to this day, Haiti is being penalized. Is being punished in every type of way. Haiti continues to be a neo-colony, but it's 11 million people, and then another 2 million in the diaspora refuse to conform to neocolonialism. So what you have, just to bring it up a few hundred years in one sentence, today you have this massive struggle. It's a mass struggle against this dictator named Jovenel Moise. Of course, colonialism switches to neocolonialism in Africa, in Asia, in South America, in the Caribbean. So Jovenel Moise would be the puppet. In Creole, they say, yon tissu sous blanc, yon choule blanc. He's the títere, he's the puppet of the puppeteers. So you have this mass struggle against this dictator. And of course, the Haitian people know upon whose shoulders, whose historical shoulders they stand with this struggle.
Okay. And then let's talk. And then can you talk about, we had a period of U.S. occupation between 1915 and 1934. And would you be able to provide some information as to what took place there?
Yeah, 100%. And at the same time, they were occupying the Dominican Republic in 1916. And the U.S. invaded Nicaragua with William Walker, like Juan Guaido-esque, declaring himself the president of Nicaragua, of a sovereign country. These filibusters, the real-life pirates, they invaded Nicaragua like 30 times in the early 1900s. So they saw the entire Caribbean, all of Central America, as their quote-unquote backyard. This was the big stick policy of Theodore Roosevelt. And 1915 to 1934 lays the basis for Haiti as this economic, political, diplomatic, military neocolony of the U.S. So this past century of struggle has been this struggle against U.S. imperialism, against U.S. neocolonialism. And one of the chief things in 1915 was to set up what would become the Tonton Macoutes, what's today the National Police Force of Haiti, an obedient, pliant police force that would do the bidding of imperialism in Haiti. So I just got word about an hour before we went live. A comrade I was with last week, he just took a bullet in the leg. So they raced him to the public hospitals, but then the police control the public hospitals. So I actually want to share the images because the purpose of this live, we'll get the analysis in as well. But of course, the protagonist is the Haitian people, the Haitian masses. I'm just whatever messenger I can be. And I didn't go there as a professor. I know, Victor, you call me professor out of love. I went to Haiti because the comrades, they laid it out to me like this. The Haitian leadership, there's different revolutionary organizations, but I work closely with different organizations. There's Goff, which is the movement for equality and fraternity across Haiti. And Goff laid it out like this. This is a battle of ideas. Like Fidel said, this is a battle for visibility. Who cares about Haiti? We don't even have internet. How can we wage the war on Facebook? Forget CNN, forget corporate media, imperialist media, white supremacist media. How can we wage the war on Facebook? We barely have internet. Electricity, paguen courant. We don't have electricity. So I've been in touch with the Haitian comrades, since in 1998. I first was in Haiti because I lived in the Dominican Republic, and there's an incredible book by a Dominican poet, Diogenes Abreu, Dominican poet, writer, and he says you can't understand Dominicanness without understanding Haitianness. And that was last week's conversation with Cesar Ascension Villalona. So living and working with the left in DR brought me shoulder to shoulder, épaule sous épaule, avec camarade haïtien with the Haitian left. So it's been a long relationship. So when they called upon me and I thought I could somehow be of use in this battle of ideas, that's what brought me to Haiti. I mean, we can deepen the understanding of that U.S. occupation because Francois Duvalier, who's the Trujillo of Haiti, they called him Papa Doc. He comes out.
That was going to be my next question. Your thought on the Duvalier dynasty. You have Papa Doc was in power between 57 and 71, and then Baby Doc, his son, between 71 and 86. Any thoughts on that era and the significance of the Duvalier dynasty?
Yeah, that was the transition from the direct U.S. rule, the occupation. Then they ruled through these títeres, through these clowns. The Juan Guaido of Haiti, if you will, Trujillo or the Somoza or Stroessner, to use the example of Paraguay, whatever petty dictator they can rule through. The famous quote from the Secretary of State was that Trujillo in DR was the son of a B word, but he was our son of a B word, so we could rule through him. So that's what they do with Papa Doc, Francois Duvalier. And then he dies in 71, and his son is 16 years old. So they put a 16-year-old kid, you know, spoiled brat, in the seat of power, in the summits of power in Haiti. So Haiti continues to defy this dictatorship, this neocolonialism. And the Duvaliers represented exactly that. They ran the Tonton Macoutes, which was the NYPD of Haiti. It was this fearsome, gruesome, these death squads, no different than El Salvador and Guatemala, in the Contras in Nicaragua. They were funded and armed to the teeth by U.S. taxpayer dollars. So the understanding of Mole Goff today, and 3 weeks ago, we tried to have a few of the leaders on live. And we, out of 4 leaders, we got 2 somehow, some way, 2 Haitian leaders. Because, of course, y'all don't need to hear it from me. You need to hear it from the Haitian people. But, of course, there's the language challenge, and then there's things we take for granted, like YouTube Live. And so what I have today, then, is all the interviews, all the up-to-date info, and we're just going to share it through here so that Mole Goff, so that other Haitian leadership, peasant leadership, women's leadership, the popular sectors can speak through Sons of Fidel, speak through ANTICONQUISTA.
In 1990, John Bertrand Aristide gets elected president, and he's often characterized as the first truly elected leader in Haiti. Can you talk about the significance of Aristide? I believe he was ousted out of power. There were 2 coups against Aristide, and then so he, you know, there's that period there between 1990 and 2004. The first coup was in 91. You have the U.S. occupation in 94. He returns under certain conditions. He wins again in 2000, and then you had another coup in 2004. And then there's the U.S. State Department and U.S. Empire version of what took place. And I believe you tweeted something about that not too long ago, where you hear Bush saying, you know, essentially that this was that this wasn't a coup, and there was a peaceful transition, so on and so forth. But then you have Aristide's version, which I recommend folks to, when you get a chance, if you can go into the Democracy Now! Archives. Amy Goodman has a really good interview with him where he gives his version. Can you talk about that period between 1990 and 2004? And then we'll go ahead and kind of sort of fast forward into what's happening today.
Yeah, great questions. I can tell you did your homework, and I hope all of us can be students of the Haitian revolutionaries, of Haitian history. I've learned so much. I mean, for me, it's very spiritual and emotional being over there. Jean-Bertrand Aristide, TTT, the Tille-Église, the small church, or the poor people's church. Jean-Bertrand Aristide comes up from the bottom. He is an OG liberation theologian, like Oscar Ramiro in El Salvador, like Gustavo Gutierrez in Chile. So he says, if we're going to talk about all this, Bible stuff, let's take it to the poor. And in his sermons in 1984, 85, when he's coming up, he uses the biblical teachings to spit fire at the rich, to talk about reparations, to demand a minimum wage, because you have all these sweatshops in Haiti. That's where a lot of baseballs, most of the baseballs in the Major League Baseball and across the world, the baseballs were made in Haiti. There's an incredible documentary, Mickey Mouse goes to Haiti, about Walt Disney World sweatshops in Haiti, where they were paying 19 cents an hour. So, of course, it was the military boots that paved the way for the economic exploitation of Haiti. So Jean-Bertrand Aristide, standing atop this legacy of the Haitian revolutionaries. And I didn't mention the CACOs, C-A-C-O, CACO. The Cacos were the guerrilla resistance in Haiti in 1915, led by Charles Perat. They had 15,000 people, soldiers, peasant soldiers, guerrilla warfare against the U.S. occupation. The leader was Charles Perat. At the same time, the Dominicans, across this artificial border, we need to talk about that border and contextualize that historically. Across the border, the Dominicans are occupied from 1916 to 1924 by U.S. soldiers. It's then that the U.S. supposedly introduced a lot of English and vocabulary. That's where you get the words mangu and pariguayo and a lot of this vocabulary in DR. And the same thing in Haiti. When you speak Creole, like they say job or they say boss, and that's the English language through the occupation. And of course, it was a fierce spiritual war against voodooism, against the spiritual ways of the Haitian people. I can talk a lot about that. But Jean-Bertrand Aristide stands atop this historical legacy. To understand Aristide and Haitian history, Aristide's like a Martin Luther King for the Haitian people. Aristide's like, I could say a Hugo Chavez for the Haitian people, but then I have to, there's a caveat. I have to clarify a lot. Because Jean-Bertrand Aristide, when he takes power and he starts talking about reparations and equality, immediately the U.S., the troika of tyranny, the true troika of tyranny, U.S., the United Nations, and the Organization of American States, the OAS, with Canada, with England, with France, with the former colonial powers, they swing into action against Aristide. I was young then, but I remember some of it. I remember in 1991, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, their whole propaganda campaign against Aristide was that he was mentally ill and that he was on lithium. This is what all the headlines said in Montreal and in New York, because they were afraid of Aristide. So before the pink tide, I don't love that term pink tide because we about a red tide, but that's a historical footnote. In Spanish, they don't really say pink tide. They say el movimiento bolivariano, the Bolivarian movement, which sounds more revolutionary. But in English, we say the pink tide. So a decade before Hugo Chavez wins the election in 1998, you have really the original pink tide. The original Bolivarian movement is in Haiti because Jean-Bertrand Aristide overwhelmingly wins the election in 1991. But then, boom, there's a coup almost immediately. So once again, the Haitians are shortchanged by imperialism, by invasion, by occupation. There's an incredible book here. Everyone should look up Stan Goff. Stan Goff was a Special Forces Ranger. He was part of the 1994 U.S. invasion. Off the top of my head, I want to say 25,000 U.S. Marines, U.S. Special Force troops invade Haiti in 1994. So this book, Hideous Dream, is very good. And what the Marines, of course, are doing, what the U.S. is doing, so Aristide's in exile. Aristide had to go into exile in Venezuela originally. And then, of course, Clinton's saying, we want democracy in Haiti. And they, quote unquote, bring back Aristide. But they bring back an Aristide who they've tried to control and muzzle and tame. They bring him back under all these neoliberal conditions. Basically saying, okay, we'll bring you back, but you now have to you have to serve our interests. So the Haitian movement talked about the first Aristide, the original Aristide, the kidnapped, abducted Aristide, and then what became of Aristide. Aristide is a very brilliant tactician and politician. So I don't want to, speak too much on this, but just so people have the basics of this rudimentary history, Haitian history, Aristide comes back, but it's a modified, more liberal, reformist Aristide. He's not that firebrand revolutionary that control him. But then 2004, 2001, he wins again. And I was in Haiti when he won again for the campaigning. La Balasse was this mass movement. It still is a mass movement, but it doesn't have the revolutionary character. Lavalas, famille Lavalas. It means the flood, the people's flood, metaphorically. To sweep away the bourgeoisie, the elites. So Aristide, and then they kidnap him again. In 2004, U.S. Marines, the U.S. Embassy, and this is when Democracy Now!, for whatever critiques we have, they play their role. We should be critical, but if they're the only ones covering it, what do you do? Aristide was kidnapped again. Of course, Bush, that's the speech you were talking about. George Bush went on TV and said Aristide has resigned. He didn't resign in 2004. He was whisked away on a U.S. Special Forces plane to Banjul, to the Central African Republic, where he was in exile for like the next 4 or 5 years. So twice, Aristide, the people's candidate, is kidnapped, is forced out of power. So to understand what we're going to get into today, all these images, the Haitian people speaking, we have to go through this, the centuries of history and then these past decades of history. Or like Fred Hampton says, we'll get answers that don't answer and solutions that don't solve. There's a whole lot of Haitian Americans right now. Haitian Americans, they say diaspora from the word diaspora. Diaspora, they don't understand what's happening in Haiti. And if all you have is MSNBC and the New York Times, or worse, the right-wing media, how could you understand Haiti? So hopefully this conversation can be a conversation with diaspora, with Haitian Americans as well.
What is the current president's name?
Yeah, the dictator, Jovenel Moïse. His constitutional mandate, according to the 1987 Constitution, which was a result of the people's revolt, they called it déchoucage. Déchoucage means uprising. When they overthrew Baby Doc, they burned, they burned the rich's property, and it was like Haitian Revolution 2.0. It was another social revolution. They repainted towns, they repainted neighborhoods. A muzzled people could finally speak freely. All these organizations were formed, and unions, and peasant leadership, and women's leadership. Haiti at last had this hope after how many decades and decades of dictatorship. So Jovenel Moïse, he came into power, and his constitutional mandate, according to the 1987 Constitution, his 5 years was up on February 14th, on last month. So Haiti watchers, people in solidarity with Haiti, you could see it was going to explode. And it did explode into the streets. This is a mass movement. And my experience there, I got back a few days ago, whether it was a small student demonstration of a few hundred, the police showed up with bullets, tear gas, boom, boom, boom. Haitians running for their lives, some degree of self-defense, but how do you defend yourself when the states have the state has all the guns? So this is a heavyweight. This is a heavyweight fight. And then if it was a massive, massive demonstration, hundreds of thousands in the streets. I was at both smaller youth-led student demonstrations, or doctors came into the streets, because last week a doctor was kidnapped and assassinated. There's a massive kidnapping campaign over there. They kidnapped these 2 Dominican brothers. We got to get into the Dominican side of things too, if we can make a little bullet point there, because there's so much to cover. But Jovenel Moïse, Neg Banan, he's a joker. He's very untalented, mediocre. He gave an address about 10 days ago to the United Nations from Port-au-Prince, from the presidential palace, and he could barely get internet connection. So the dictator, U.S. imposed, U.S. sponsored dictator can't get internet. Imagine in the hood, imagine in the bidonville where the people live every day. So his 30-minute rambling rant to the United Nations was pure rhetoric. But Jovenel Moïse, he was a banana exporter. He was a businessman. First, they had Michel Martelly. These are truly mediocre clowns or puppets who they put into power. no different than Luis Abinader in DR or Danilo Medina. It's just the latest yes man who they can rule through. So that's who Jovenel Moïse is. And he said, no, I have another year in power. And the Haitian people said no. And then he went to the United Nations, not physically, but through whatever Zoom. And he tried to say, we're making socioeconomic gains. Things are good here. And of course, there's a virtual media blackout on Haiti. So a lot of the Western powers were believing, Jovenel Moïse. But that's who Jovenel Moïse is. Just your standard run-of-the-mill, untalented, petty dictator that they handpicked. Michel Martelly handpicked him as his successor. So there's been no people's democracy in Haiti since Aristide. It's been so long, but the Haitian people continue to push forward.
I want to read off. So just to provide some context here, most legal experts and obviously civil society and a bunch of, obviously you're seeing the popular resistance there. Most folks agree that his term is essentially, it has ended. It did end on February 7th. And I did find, it was interesting. I was trying to look up, information about the Haitian Constitution. I did find something here, and I think this is important to highlight. So he won a first round in October of 2015. There was lots of reports of widespread voter fraud. And so a presidential runoff was pushed back. Another vote was held in 2016, and he won with 55.6% of the vote. And then he eventually took office in February 7th, 2017. However, here's what that's his argument that, well, I took power in 2017, and it's a 5-year term, so I should be there until 2022. However, this is what the actual Constitution reads. Article 134-1 of the Haitian Constitution states that the duration of the presidential mandate is 5 years. This period begins and ends on February 7th, following the date of elections. But then Article 134-2 stipulates that in case the vote cannot take place before February 7th, the elected president takes office immediately after the vote is confirmed, and his mandate is expected to begin on February 7th in the year of the election. And so that's where you have that contention there, where most legal scholars are saying, no, you're done. In 2021, you're done. So I wanted to just provide that context for folks. Can you talk about two things? Is there a parliamentary government running? What's going on with the Supreme Court, and how has he been ruling?
Yeah, I can respond to that, but Victor, why don't I show a few images just to
Sure, absolutely.
Flow. So let me do this, because this is about the Haitians, speaking of course, as we know. So right now, the Haitian people were in the streets today. Sunday is the climactic day when tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Haitians come into the streets. And the Haitian Solidarity Movement, different ad hoc coalitions, Black Alliance for Peace and Haiti Liberty, Haiti Liberty, different Haitian organizations in Miami and across this country, they're calling for a weekend of actions, the 27th, 28th, and 29th, in solidarity with Haiti. I'm glad, Victor, you could point out that all the legal language behind this so people understand that. But just to fast forward to right now, breaking what's happening, I worked out there with a Haitian revolutionary organization that I mentioned, Goff. And one of the leaders who I was with just a few days ago, he was actually just shot. So that's what we, let me show that immediately so we can take people on the ground to Haiti. So this was minutes before he was shot. So the sign says Molegaf. Molegaf would be the equivalent of a revolutionary organization here in the U.S., like what the Young Lords were, or the Brown Berets, the Panthers, the American Indian Movement. Molegaf says, down with this U.S. government, down with this dictatorship, this dictatorial regime, Jovenel Moise's dictatorial regime supported by the U.S. government. And then it's this comrade here. This is Dodo, and then this is Jean Rene. They call him Chata, who was shot moments after. This picture shows when they were rallying, and then he's shot in the leg. So they rushed him to a hospital, but then the police surround the hospital. So again, this is within the last hour or so that this is happening. So how do we do our best to be in solidarity with the Haitian people as this stuff is unfolding? So I want to keep going back to the images, just so people can appreciate that it's unfolding, it's pending, it's unfinished. But who's covering this in the U.S.? You know, when I was on the ground there, I saw 3 journalists from Vice, but you know, Vice is that hipster journalism. Vice, they try to do a lot of sensationalism. They're basically looking for the quote unquote sensationalistic negative headlines and images from Haiti. And right now, the Venezuelans, you know, the Bolivarian Revolution, the Patria Grande is so advanced that they have their own, you know, media teams. So they actually sent in some comrades, and it has to be comrades who speak Creole. You can't, if you go into Haiti, you parle Creole, ooh, petit, c'est chargé. You how are you gonna get around? So the Bolivarians sent in some journalists, not journalists in the CNN sense. I'm not a journalist. I wasn't there as a professor. I was there as a revolutionary, as a falpista, as a MPDista, but of course I had to put on that journalism hat because it's the battle of ideas that Fidel talked about. And just to quote a Haitian leader named Patrick, he's in exile right now. He had to go into exile in Caracas, but he said, I'm paraphrasing, it's word for word in social media, but Patrick said, all they ever do is djabolize. Job is devil. All they do is demonize us, vilify us. When they talk about Haiti, they talk about negative, black magic and voodoo, as though voodoo was a negative thing, and infectious disease, negative, coups, crisis. How can we wage the informational war? This is an informational war. How do we respond to the informational war? We cannot let the imperialists win the informational war. So that explains how I ended up in Haiti, playing this role with Telesur, with VTV, that's Venezuelan national TV. That's something we forget. How here in the belly of the beast, can we imagine a revolutionary CNN? I'm not gonna say a revolutionary Fox because that name Fox is forever gonna be horrific, but a revolutionary television, revolutionary radio. And that's what the Venezuelans, and Telesur is not just Venezuelan. It was originally Argentinian, Uruguayan, Cuban. It was the Patria Grande, you know, the big homeland, the Bolivarian dream. So that's how these types of things were organized, so that I could play that role because of my knowledge of Creole, because of my relationship with the Haitian people, being a student of Creole and a student of the Haitian people. So I'll go back to images, Victor, but you can steer it in whatever direction you want, and then I'll keep letting the Haitian people speak.
Sure. I do want to provide just some more context for folks, just for folks to understand, like, what's happening out there. So about 24 people have been arrested. At least 24 people have been arrested so far, including a Supreme Court judge, a senior police official. Journalists have been injured. You just mentioned one of the comrades from Goff getting shot. Kidnappings have been a commonplace. You mentioned a few of them there. President, quote unquote, President Jovenel, how do you pronounce the last name? Shaw, help me out with the
Moise
has essentially been, not essentially, he's been governing by decree since January 2020. There's essentially no Supreme Court. The legislator was essentially, not there's some issue there with the quote unquote president postponing certain elections, and so essentially there's really no legislator there. So I mean, this guy has total grips has complete grip of all the institutions at this point. There's a lot of talks of, and I was going to ask you the question of, historically how gangs have played a role politically, and there's a lot of talks that the quote unquote president dictator is using gangs to essentially intimidate opposition groups. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What were the folks saying out there about that? Because there's, again, just from my research, there's this common thread of and then historically this has always been the case. I remember President Aristide said sort of the same thing, that it was a bunch of gangs and thugs that showed up, during during the second coup. So again, I'm not sure what the talks were out there about that, but I mean, it just seems like a completely chaotic mess. And then just to provide a little bit more context, this is what the State Department said. It is the responsibility of Haiti's government to organize elections in 2021 that are free, that are fair, that are credible, and is essentially come out and support this dictator. So again, I'll stop there and wait for your thoughts.
So the gang situation, gangyo, because that's the same word they use in Creole. Basically, Victor, just to use New York City as an analogy, the revolutionaries will control, let's say, Jackson Heights, but then you want to go to Corona, Queens, and that'll be controlled by pro-government forces, potentially paramilitary-esque. There's another great book here, Paramilitarism and the Assault on Democracy in Haiti. Jeb Sprague, another important scholar on Haiti. Paramilitarism and the Assault on Democracy in Haiti. So whether it's paramilitaries or gangs, there's a fine line. But what I heard on the ground there over and over, first of all, I couldn't just move freely. There's a lot of places I couldn't go. And I followed the Haitian leadership. What they told me to do is what I did. I wasn't a freelancer, or I was following their lead. But of course, they know, we can't go this way. And just like in, I want to show images of this when I get a sec, but just like in the Dominican Republic, los callejones, the alleyways. So in these alleyways, that's where the revolutionaries are. So if you're in a revolutionary neighborhood, you're like the safest person ever, because they all taking care of you and you're in the struggle. But if you leave that one hood and you try to go to Far Rockaway, or you try to go to Long Island City or Astoria, across Port-au-Prince, it's a toss-up. It's I called it a battle for hegemony. Who controls those neighborhoods? So some people talk about what's called the G9, the confederation of gangs. Then others say that some of these things are not completely settled. These are ongoing conversations. Other journalists or experts, Haiti watchers, Haitian leadership, they're saying that some of these paramilitary organizations or unorganized organizations have some revolutionary potential, and that they've been scapegoated, or they've been vilified by Jovenel Moise and the dictatorship, and you can't believe. So it's very confusing. It is confusing. In politics, and alliances are dynamic. So things are shifting. What I can tell you is there's an epidemic of kidnappings. And that's how these two Dominican brothers were kidnapped about 2 weeks ago. They were released last week, and they were kidnapped with a Haitian leader named Tineg. And the Dominican press called for a Dominican military invasion into Haiti to get the two brothers, but never called for any of the Haitian women or Haitian leaders who were kidnapped to be released. They were just worried about the two Dominicans because they were Dominican. So you get into this very narrow-minded nationalism, xenophobia, and that's what the right wing in the Dominican Republic is famous for. In fact, right now, as we speak, what Luis Abinader talked about last week, Victor, he talked about they're going to build a wall. They're going to build a 374-kilometer wall on the border with Haiti. So the Haitians are in the middle of a life and death fight for survival. And what does the Dominican ruling class do? They're going to build a wall to keep Haitians out in a most Trump-esque way. But the gangs, the gangs could be organic because of this deep, neoliberal assault on economic democracy. And people need, like kidnapping is not native to Haiti. There's not a history of kidnapping. There's not a history of suicide bombing in Palestine. But when you have F-16 jets dropping bombs, Zionist bombs, Israeli bombs, what are people going to do? They're going to defend themselves. They're going to defend their land. How many Palestinians are in exile? The Palestinians are not historically, quote unquote, suicide bombers. That's the propaganda, right? So this whole kidnapping thing, the Haitians say there's no history of kidnapping here, unless you talk about the US, UN, OAS kidnapping of our presidents and assassination of our leaders. Those are the historical kidnappers. But yeah, there's a spate of kidnapping. So again, I had to just follow the Haitians' leadership, and they risk their lives every day because the government could just go kidnap somebody and then blame it on some rogue gang. So hopefully that begins to respond to your question. Shout out here to Black Alliance for Peace, Matthew. Keep in touch with Matt and with BAP. There's the website. They do amazing work. Ajamu Baraka, one of the great thinkers of anti-imperialist thinkers of our time. Shout out to Guinea, to Izquierdista, to Emily, to Ziryab, Jameer, everyone who joins us across the U.S. and the diaspora, Turtle Island. Yes, we are on stolen land. There's a lot of great questions there. I'll respond to one point that some of the comrades are hammering home over and over, and I don't think it can be emphasized enough. The U.S. didn't want to be the sole occupier. The U.S. always wants to have a multilateral fig leaf, a multilateral cover, camouflage. So shamefully, it was Lula. It was the PT, Partido dos Trabalhadores in Brazil. It's the PT in Lula who oversees the United Nations, something like 20,000 UN police and military occupy Haiti from 2004 until 2018. The UN is still in Haiti, but not supposedly in a military capacity. Now they're in an administrative capacity. And that's why we have to study what's direct colonialism, what's indirect colonialism. In a way, the U.S. prefers to rule through puppets because boots on the ground in Syria, the bombing of Syria, like they did last week, those violations of sovereignty, that brings us into the streets more. That brings us in front of the United Nations, in front of the Pentagon, in front of the White House, to Times Square. The U.S. would prefer to rule through the puppets. But then the military-industrial complex, you can't build more bombs if you haven't used bombs. So there's different competing U.S. ruling interests. But Brazil, so here's Lula, part of the Pink Tide, and Dilma Rousseff. And I think it's the biggest stain on Lula's record. Not that Lula was any Hugo Chavez or Fidel Castro, but he was like an Aristide, he was like a Juan Bosch, he was like a Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, if you will. He was a social democrat. He represented some type of gains for the Brazilian people. So for the Brazilians, they were the spearhead of this. It was called MINUSTA. It was the UN Ministry of quote unquote stabilization. So they were the ones that occupied Haiti post US Marines, US occupation 1994, the one that's written about in this hideous dream book. They go in with this multilateral. So it goes from direct unilateral US control to have this UN facade. So yeah, thanks to the comments here from Guinea and others on how shameful what Lula did was. And even in the PT, I mean, the PT's it's like an umbrella organization. So there's a lot of ideological differences within the PT, but a lot of Brazilian revolutionaries agree with us 100%. A lot of whom are also outside of the PT and say, F the PT. The PT is too liberal and they're neoliberal and we don't believe in them. So the gang thing is essential to understand. I'm actually going to grab, y'all should check out for trilingual coverage. This is one of the best newspapers, Haiti Liberty. This is in Haitian Creole, French, and English, so you can get updates. If someone can put Haiti Liberty in the comments, if you can Google it and cut and paste. Incredible journalism, critical scholars, revolutionaries from around the world. And yeah, thanks, Matt. We have the weekend of actions across this country in solidarity with Haiti, targeting federal buildings, ICE headquarters. Yeah, because right now so all this is going on, and similar to the Dominican government, they're deporting Haitians, you know, and Biden saying that ICE went rogue, and Biden doesn't want to take credit, but Biden's the one now deporting Haitians in the middle of this social upheaval in Haiti.
Professor Shaw, couple things. There, you mentioned in another interview how there's a proliferation of NGOs in Haiti, and I see here Emily Davilo. Shout out to Emily, who keeps asking about the actual conditions in Haiti. So two-pronged question. One, the role of the NGO, non-governmental organizations in Haiti, how that ties into any material gains for the working class people of Haiti. And then two, what is this? I mean, here, so, you know, we've provided a lot of context, I believe, for the audience. What is this absolute obsession that the world has with Haiti? I mean, it seems to be this obsession, right, between, you know, the former colonial powers, the UN, you know, folks in the nonprofit and NGO world. And I mean, what is this obsession about? So that's my two-pronged question there.
Yeah. I mean, I've never seen any country in the world with a higher proportion or ratio of non-governmental organizations. As the Haitians have taught me, the right hand of imperialism is the bludgeon. They repress the revolutionary leadership. And then with the liberal hand, the reformist hand, I'm not even going to say the word leftist because it's not leftist. The reformist liberal hand, they come in with the crumbs. They come in with the NGOs. So those are the two hands of neocolonialism. And shout out to Dr. Walter Rodney. The ANTICONQUISTA Comrades had a tribute to Dr. Rodney 3 nights ago. So everyone should do their homework and check out Dr. Rodney and Ramiro, Nick, and other comrades' analysis. So if charity changed anything, it would be illegal. I put a link here to a direct link to the comrades in Molegaff in the popular movement, so we can support the resistance. You know, and I want to write here, solidarity, not charity, which is a slogan of the Haitian leadership. So you have the link there so that we can be in direct touch, supporting the resistance. Because you have this basic American or human instinct. You know, I'm going to give to the Red Cross, the poor Haitians, but they're not poor. They're exploited. They're oppressed. They're muzzled. They're, you know, they in Haiti, they call it the development of underdevelopment. So how can we be in solidarity, not charity? And so I put the link there to, we're raising funds through Molegaf, for Molegaf, people to people. Because all these charity organizations, there was a study that came out in ProPublica and in WikiLeaks as well. The Red Cross, post-earthquake, the Red Cross collected in donations from Americans. You know, every American wanted to help. It's the basic goodness of human beings. So people gave $10 and $50 to the Red Cross. The Red Cross gathered about $500 million. They claimed they built 130,000 homes, but it was a lie. With that $500 million, they built 6 homes. And that's according to their own leaked internal reviews. So there was this whole thing that played out within the Red Cross. So charity's pathetic. We know this, you know, that's how imperialism functions. So let's go back to the Haitian revolutionaries so they can answer some of these questions on the ground. So this here, so these are the comrades in the streets today. I clicked on, this is the fundraiser by Molegaf, and thanks to everyone who's already, you know, given on behalf of the Haitian leadership. That's the same leader you saw. This is the chef de mobilisation. He's the street coordinator. So like, how do you strategize when the police are rolling up on you? So that's his function. The women leaders, this is the chapeau paille. That's the peasant hat that symbolizes the historical resistance of the peasantry, the fight for the land. This is Lalim is the UN representative of that ongoing UN administrative occupation. And here Molegaf is saying, down with imperialism, up with socialism, Organization of American States, and then BINU, that's the UN mission. Plus Jovenel equals corruption, Molegaf, hands off, US hands off. So please be in solidarity with the Haitians, because when we share our resources, they can buy more signs. They can get more internet and cell phones. So what we want is that every revolutionary can be their own journalist. So everyone has the link there in the chat. So I want you to hear from the Haitian leadership. This is Camille Chalmers. He's a polyglot. Many Haitians speak 2, 3, 4 languages, including Camille. This is an important leader. He's the leader of PAPDA. PAPDA is the platform for alternative development. So let's listen to a soundbite of Camille at a press conference.
Nous organiser conférence pour nous capable approfondir question, pour nous avoir connexion entre projet politique là et projet économique là, pour nous capable regarder comment construire une véritable solidarité des peuples. Parce que là, on dit communauté internationale, c'est un euphémisme qui veut dire impérialisme. Parce que là, on dit communauté internationale, il y a peut-être qui ça États-Unis a dit, il y a peut-être qui ça Conseil de sécurité a dit. Nous-mêmes nous dit non.
So what he's saying is, and it's written there in the tweet, because you know, every tweet that I brought from Haiti and continue to pass on, we translate those to an international audience. But what Camille is saying is, that was a press conference, and he was saying it's about people-to-people solidarity. It's not about charity. It's about internationalism. And imperialism has monopolized. Imperialism is never going to call itself imperialism. Barack Obama is not going to go on TV and say, we are recolonizing Libya, support us. He's going to say, we are the international community. He's going to use all these euphemisms. And what Camille is saying there is, they've stolen the international community. We're the international community, the humble people of the US and Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, and that's the international community. These individuals are international bandits, pirates, and an international cabal. So let me share one other voice from from Haiti, Victor. Well, we covered Hideous Dream, the U.S. occupation. Oh, this is very important, and we can use this as a stepping stone. Oh, I didn't share my. I didn't share my screen. I'm all excited and I haven't shared my screen. So, Victor, this is going to lead into a bunch of important stuff about Dominican-Haitian relations. So, what you're about to see is Haitian soldiers who fought in the Dominican Republic in 1965. When the Dominican Republic was invaded by 42,000 U.S. Marines, there were Haitian volunteers who went and fought to defend Dominican sovereignty, who fought and died to defend Dominican self-determination. So this is in Creole and French, but let's listen to a piece.
Fondamentalement, vous n'êtes pas contre les Américains.
Non, nous ne sommes pas contre les Américains, mais nous sommes contre le fait de cette intervention. Et non pas seulement l'intervention, mais qu'ils se mettent du côté de Wessien.
Es preciso destacar la convicción y los principios con los que combatieron estos haitianos. Pratiquement, qu'est-ce qu'il vous reste comme arme? J'ai l'impression qu'il vous reste plus grand-chose.
So that clip was an interview from different journalists in 1965 interviewing the Haitian volunteers. I just got goosebumps. Y'all know the name of the main boulevard, the main avenue in Port-au-Prince? John Brown Avenue. So we're marching shoulder to shoulder and the police are attacking, and I look up John Brown Avenue and I was like, oh my God, like this is just so ancestral, spiritual. I can just feel the rah-rah. Rah-rah is like when Haitians march, Dominicans too, they got that energy and they're dancing together. That's part of the voodoo culture. They call it rah-rah. A lot of times you'll see them take branches or trees and boom, boom, that's rah-rah, or they'll use the branches as like a symbol of peace. So, well, Victor, I'll throw it over there to you, because this question of Dominican and Haitian solidarity, I mean, the left in DR is they don't even know what to do. I've been hitting them up like, yo, in the words of Bunchy Carter, the leader of the LA Panthers, who was assassinated in 1969 with John Huggins, even if you do something, even if you spit, do something, the Dominican left doesn't know what to do. They don't know how to support. So that's something we really got to look at. I've been positioned over the years. I was the translator in 2001 between the Haitian delegations and the Dominican delegations to try to get more solidarity, because it's a different history, it's a different language, but it's one island. It's two neo-colonies of the U.S. It's the same struggle. So how can the Dominican left counteract this vicious right-wing jingoistic propaganda of the Dominican right wing? These are big questions, Victor.
Well, I mean, La Fuerza de la Revolución, which I'm still a member of. I mean, we take a very clear position on that. Documents have been written about our position. We're very clear about our position. We're for the full integration of Haitian immigrants into Dominican society. We're against any type of xenophobia. We're against any type of legislation which actively discriminates, openly and actively discriminates against the Haitian community. We're pretty clear on our position. But I think what happens is obviously we are, let's be real, the left in Dominican Republic, much like the left, so-called left here in the United States, is fractured, balkanized, and so it's not a one cohesive group, and we don't have power, right? So in the Dominican Republic, much like here, we just don't have power, and so that complicates things clearly. But that's not to say that La Fuerza is not going to continue doing the work and putting that message out there about what our position is. We're pretty clear on what we stand for when it comes to our Haitian brothers and sisters.
Yeah, shout out to La Fuerza de la Revolución. We heard from Cesar last week. powerful Dominican leftist organizations. And I'll just make the call public. Like, what we've been trying to do is get Dominican leaders, Dominican comrades, poets, cultural workers to send solidarity, greetings through social media in your language, in Spanish, and we'll translate it to Creole. And like I said, so many of the Haitian leaders, the Haitian people are very, very bilingual, trilingual, and polyglot people. So another some resources here people have been asking about further study. Put in the way it cut and paste is not pretty into the chat there, but I just put about 10 different documentaries, anti-imperialist documentaries, to understand Haiti more. Aristide, The Endless Revolution, Opposing Imperialism in Haiti, Bitter Cane, A Pig's Tale, Resistance. Those are all different documentaries. I wish it came out prettier, but that's how the cut and paste came out. I'll share more straight from the Haitian people. You want to say something first?
Well, I just want to say, look, I've talked about before how I spent time organizing the Dominican Republic, and the problems of the country, whatever internal problem that the Dominican Republic is facing, is not due to a Haitian problem, quote unquote problem, or a Haitian migration to I was in the Dominican Republic. I had nothing but love for my Haitian brothers and sisters. And so the problem in the Dominican Republic are the Dominicans. All right. Let's be clear about that. All right. So, I just wanted to put that out there. And, it incenses me, this idea that somehow Dominicans need to view Haitians as a threat or a problem or whatever. Right. It's just silly. It's silly, and it's based on a lot of ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, to understand what I'm going to call here unnecessary racism, we just have to look at poor white people, where I come from in the U.S. And poor white people are the quote-unquote necessary carriers of white supremacy, because if poor people united, we'd have a revolution tomorrow. So racism, like Malcolm said, you can't have capitalism without racism. So in the Dominican context, in the Dominican historical context, the Dominican people have been fed this anti-Haitian, this diet of anti-Haitianismo. But of course, the enemy is never the Dominican people. It's how do we overcome those divisions, that xenophobia, that scapegoat, those Trump right-wing tactics. So I'll share my screen again so the Haitian people can speak through the work we do. That was the beauty of being there in Haiti. It was nonstop. I mean, I couldn't sleep at night. It was just too exciting. I was learning too much. This is an incredible poet. Follow Ricardo, Camarada Ricardo Boucher. Follow this comrade on Facebook. Twitter's not as big there because you just don't have the kind of technology. Facebook's a little bit bigger. But here's Ricardo.
Moi, c'est dans la perspective de faire sans déclarer l'éducation populaire à travers poésie.
So Ricardo is a poet, a revolutionary, and in the Paulo Freirean tradition, I know there's critiques of Freire, but it just came out. Ricardo's a popular educator. He's a revolutionary. And what he's talking about right there is like Bob Marley said, teach the children the truth. And if you look at that picture again, I'll go back to it. Those are the corridor, the alleyways. And in the corridor, they have a project called Poetry, the People, and Revolution. You can't really see here down the alleyways. This is a revolutionary neighborhood. Like any one of us, if you're on the side of the people, that's the safest place in the world. The problem is when you leave there, then you're in the dictatorship streets. That's when you can get hurt. But if you were there, you're safe. So we do want to send, I don't think we're at this point yet, but we do want to send delegations to Haiti, peace, solidarity delegations, so comrades can have these experiences. But on this wall here, that's Poetry, the People, and the Revolution. That's his poetry spray painted. And another reason why we have to continue to fundraise. So that's Ricardo Boucher, who you can follow on Facebook, and then I translate his whole thing in the notes there. He is corny ass State Department talking about the international community in China. That's the official U.S. State Department person. I mean, it's embarrassing, but it's important to know what the enemy is saying. Here was the Black Alliance for Peace demonstration in Washington, D.C. last week in solidarity. Okay, this is important here. Here's one of those UN, Brazilian, or Argentinian soldiers, because Argentina was supposedly progressive, and they sent thousands of soldiers to occupy Haiti. But these are all the UN, quote-unquote, missions. They changed names, but those are the UN missions that occupied Haiti. And it's ongoing. That's how they keep Haiti as a neo-colony. So this is an important leader, Dominique. And in this interview, I asked him, what do you say to an international audience and to Diaspora Haitian Americans? I'll come back on the screen for a sec, because remember, this is a battle of ideas. And what the ruling class has done is, the ruling class has convinced us, post-1990, 1991, the end of history, there's only one way forward. Quote unquote, man, humans are egregious and evil and egotistical. You can't have socialism. You can't have collectivism. You can't have Zapatistas. You can't have Sandinistas, right? So it's a battle of ideas. They've defeated us before our ideas can even take flight, because before we're even 18, we've already been told 100 times that we're capitalist pigs and dogs. In this dog-eat-dog world, that's the way it is, right? So how do you rebel against ruling class ideas? So I asked Dominique in this interview, and I wanted to have different backgrounds. So it was risky to try to film this stuff. Those are more stories I can tell you, how we got around in the risks and who knew who, which neighborhoods you could move through stealthily. But I asked this leader, what do you say to Americans and the international community, and Haitian Americans in particular? What do you say when they put out that there's no hope for Haiti? How do you respond? So let's listen to him, and then we'll translate. Hopefully the translations and the writing.
Qui message vous envoyez pour vous?
Non, non, c'est pas ça. Ça, vous pensez pas ça. Parce qu'en Haïti, nous avons un pile richesse là nous. En Haïti, nous sommes un pays qui est tropical, nous avons belle mer, nous avons belle plage, nous avons belle rivière. Eh bien, c'est pour Haïtiens qui venir investir la caillou. Parce que la caillou a espoir.
So what he's saying there, he's saying that's the biggest lie. We're not poor. It's precisely because we're rich that they've colonized and recolonized and driven this stake through our hearts, because of how rich we are. And he lays out a whole analysis of why hope is so important. I mean, if we lose hope, why are we doing this work? We do this work because we know, in fact, it's inevitable that there'll be a new world, because this world, capitalism, imperialism, white supremacy, are not sustainable. So time-wise, Victor, let's go for another 5 minutes, and then we can do the after hours, and we can really respond in depth to all the comments here. Does that sound like?
Yeah, we're at about an hour and 9 minutes now.
Yeah, I wanna make an important point here, back so people can see with their own eyes. Haiti is not poor. Haiti has millionaires and billionaires. The monopolies in Haiti are ridiculous. And let's look at the Haitian ruling class. This is the Haitian ruling class. What do you notice about the Haitian ruling class versus the Haitian people? I mean,
they look nothing like the people who were marching out there in the streets.
Bro, it's ridiculous. And you know, for me as a student of Haiti, I wanted to see these people with my own eyes. So over the years, my time in Haiti, I would always tell the comrades, yo, bring me to Pétionville, Thomasin, Belleville, Kinskoff. Bring me to actually see where these people live. And they live in mansions, and they live in palaces, and they have private security, and they have 20 servants, 50 servants. These are, just like La Belle Pearl says, these are the true gang leaders. Until we reappropriate the wealth of these are the true thieves. This is who works with U.S. imperialism. And these are quote-unquote Haitians. Look at the last names. The Brants, the Mevs, the Boulos, Abdallah, the Brons, the Bigios, the Apaids, the Akras. And you see how light-skinned they are, because this is the essence of colonialism and neocolonialism. So we have to get that out of our vocabulary, that Haiti's poor. And you go to these neighborhoods, it's no different than Hollywood. It's no different than Beverly Hills, Upper East Side. The amount of wealth. So that's this big lie, you know, and that's what they repeat to us, Victor, a million times. We've all heard it. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. No, it's not. It's the most abused. It's the most traumatized. It's the most oppressed country in the Western Hemisphere. So our solidarity means a great deal. So all of us have a role to play, no matter how small, no matter how big, through social media, in the streets with Black Alliance for Peace and the ad hoc Haiti Solidarity Committee, Code Pink, Popular Resistance. I'm sorry I can't shout out some of the Haitian organizations in the U.S. They're going to kill me. But in Miami, you have like Haitian, Matt, maybe you can put in the other names of the organizations. Of course, there's Haiti Liberty, and there's international representatives of PAPDA and these different progressive Haitian organizations. I'm going to throw in the how to do people-to-people fundraising again to anyone who can make a contribution, because, you know, if the comrades get locked up, if the comrades are in the hospital, everything is private out there. You know, the comrades need food. The comrades need, how are they going to make signs? How can they get internet access and cell phones? You know, I think that's one of the most important grassroots projects, that every Haitian revolutionary can be their own social media influencer or people's journalist. So here, there you have the link again there, the GoFundMe, to be in direct support with Goff. So yeah, Victor, if we can cut off the official hour plus here, and then we can start responding to the comments.
You got something we can transition to, so that way when we chop it up later on?
Yeah, 100%.
So just to end this this broadcast, we'll do a little post game, if you will, folks. If you enjoy the conversation, the content, please share, please like, please check us out at ANTICONQUISTA.com. Check out the work that the other comrades are doing at ANTICONQUISTA.com. We're on SoundCloud. Just keep supporting the work that we're doing. And we appreciate y'all.
Yeah. I'm just going to play some transition videos so you can see from the streets of Port-au-Prince what it looks like right now. We're not going nowhere, but just for the podcast, we're going to have a transition, and then we'll come back to address people's questions.
¡Viva el socialismo! ¡Patria muerte! ¡Venceremos!
You're listening to Sons of Fidel on Anticonquista with Victor Coronado and Danny Shaw. Sons of Fidel is a platform for the voiceless and marginalized, oppressed and colonized peoples, the working class, Black and brown radicals, the LGBTQ community, and our allies in the struggle against imperialism. Please note, the views expressed by the hosts or guests of Sons of Fidel may not necessarily reflect the views of ANTICONQUISTA.
Cool. So let's go through the comments. I got a bunch of other books I can shout out. So someone here is talking about the Haitian Revolution, 100%. That's what this is all about. Yeah, we're denouncing. That's what this whole episode's been about: the legacy of the Haitian Revolution and white supremacy, and how they continue to fight. The Haitians continue to fight. Haiti, Haiti. Haiti is a beautiful Taino word, land of many mountains. That was the name of the island before colonization, before Columbus. Yeah, the delegations was on a U.S. delegation 6 weeks after the Guinea. Oh wow, what an incredible story! You were there in 2004. Yeah, this idea of a solidarity delegation and peace delegation, very important. Yeah, the walls between peoples. Some of the Bolivarian journalists, some Argentinian journalists who work through the Bolivarians published something denouncing that wall. Hopefully I can share it. Yeah, it's crazy to see the ruling class of Haiti. So what's up to Nestor and James, Orlando? Outside of Fuerza la Revolución, what are the major leftist parties in DR? What are their political stances on the current moment in Haiti? That's a great question. I mean, of course, there's the Frente Amplio, there's the Falpo, there's the MPD. That's how Victor and I met. Victor was returning to his homeland. I was arriving in another people's homeland, and we worked with some of the revolutionary forces who we're still in touch with. And on an individual level, I know La Fuerza and El MPD, of course they support Haiti. They support every revolution. But I think they're asking, how can we concretely support? Those are some of the big questions. And thanks to Emily, we have all the different revolutionary anti-imperialist documentaries here. So any questions, any comments? This is another one of my favorite books, The Uses of Haiti. This is an incredible social history of Haiti. I think Jonathan Kozol did the introduction, but Noam Chomsky too. And not that we don't have problems with Noam Chomsky, but right. We got to take what we got. But this book by Dr. Paul Farmer goes deep into the U.S. coups twice against Aristide. So if you want an intro into the Dominican, Haitian history, this book's pretty good. Why the Cocks Fight. Again, I'm not saying it's a flawless book, but Michelle Walker goes into a lot of this history. I think you'll find this book valuable. I can't talk enough about this book. This was one of the original Haitian revolutionaries. He was killed by the Duvaliers. But this was written in the 1950s. General Sun, my brother, this was one of the original Haitian communist leaders, poets, writers. Alexis, if you can get this book, this will take you deep into how the Haitian revolutionaries organized back then, and why, like in the US, the unofficial religion in Haiti, and why they used the Duvaliers and the Trujillos was anti-socialism, anti-communism. Jacques-Stéphane Alexis, incredible revolutionary Haitian leader. So you want to read Matt's comment, Victor? Matt's talking about some of the actions, some of the organizations that people should be checking out.
Committee to Mobilize Against Dictatorship in Haiti, based in Brooklyn. Family Action Network movement is based in Miami. a city with one of the largest concentrations of Haitians in the United States.
Yeah. So to bring it back to the Haitian people, I'm going to run through a few different interviews and then just translate them quick. Because most people don't speak Creole, I'll just give you a taste so that the Haitian people can speak, and then we can translate it. That was, you know, my role there. And how beautiful that Cuban media, Venezuelan media is covering this stuff, because imperialist media doesn't care. All right, the Haitian leaders here. So the three Haitian leaders, what was very interesting about this interview, I did that interview in the center of the International Revolutionary Voodooism. Those are practitioners of Haitian spirituality. Voodoo is not a bad word. They've brainwashed us to think that voodoo is a bad word. Voodoo is just the set of ancestral spiritual practices of the Haitian people. I wish I could share more, but if I go on YouTube to show you some of the voodoo stuff, they'll suspend the broadcast because of copyright stuff. But though a lot of the interviews was in this voodoo center, because they had their spiritual wing of fighting back and then their political wing, and the two go hand in hand. So the revolutionaries, the political revolutionaries, were shoulder to shoulder with the spiritual revolutionaries. And every march has voodoo within the march. When you see the Haitians shoulder to shoulder bouncing, that's the rah-rah that I was talking about. So they're reflecting there. You can catch like the full interviews. Some of the interviews I was able to do word for word, but it was tough in Haiti because internet was so tough. I have here the brothers, the two Dominican brothers who were kidnapped. They've been released. But y'all should listen. Their interview, they were released. The most important thing to say is it's not the Haitian people who are our enemy. It's the social conditions that they live in. Capitalism, that's our enemy. This is an incredible leader here. This doesn't need this does not need any translation. That Victor, that dude's name right there is Little Marxist. T-Marxist. I wish y'all could meet this dude. This dude is a legend. I mean, just look into his eyes. He's watching. He's asking y'all right now, what you doing for Haiti? Are you standing with us? And as you can see from the picture, la policía voló un brazo de él, pero el otro brazo está ahí para seguir tirando para adelante. The police robbed him of one of his arms. The police repression. They shot him, and he's still stronger than ever. And what's he saying? And down with imperialism, up with you know what? That don't need no. Y'all speak Creole now. So T-Marxist, oh man, if we could have that dude on the show, he would wake us all up. You see the mass nature of these marches. Oh, this is why we need the funds and the solidarity. No to dictatorship. That's early morning. That's 7 a.m. Sun's coming up. You're getting ready to march. David versus Goliath before you take the streets. And you have all those signs. Let me see what other images. Oh, solidarity from around the world, including Code Pink. US, OAS, hands off of Haiti. I'll come back to the stream now. So, yeah, as we finish up, I don't know if there's last comments, questions, if there's anything else. I mean, I'm glad I was able to get into Haiti. It wasn't easy between the repression, the restrictions. Oh, you know, it's crazy. Victor, this is going to sound crazy to people in the US, but I didn't see one mask. No COVID. I'm not going to say that publicly on YouTube or nothing, but no mask, bro.
That's crazy.
I know. It was, you know.
And was it even a part of any discussions or anything like that?
Discussions, yeah. The Haitians said, y'all been trying to kill us for 5 centuries.
Right.
COVID ain't shit. es una mierda para nosotros. So, I mean, I just followed the Haitians, you know, lead. I wasn't going to be the one. I already stuck out. You know, I'm not blending in nowhere.
Right.
So I never wore a mask. It's crazy. And because to travel, the U.S. made me, and the Haitian government made me take all these tests. So I had 3 tests in the COVID tests. Of course, they charged me an arm and a leg. And when I went to get the test, of course, it was the white Haitians charging $100 for a test. Just the way that caste system, that class system, racialized capitalism, neocolonial, it's so in your face. We know the Haitian people, and then you see the billionaires, and you see the ones running these private clinics. So to travel back, I had to pay $100 to get this test. All the tests were negative. So the Haitians were correct, you know. Shout out to Howard and Matt and everybody else. We're winding down. I don't know if there's any last questions or impressions, or we can leave the last words. Shout out to Madam Bookman. So I said this earlier, but just so y'all can see, this is an important. If you want unfolding updates from Haiti, check out Madam Bookman. Of course, Bookman was one of the original, like Macandal, one of the original Maroons. So Madame Bookman is very anti-imperialist in terms of understanding Haiti. It would be good. This is the rich area. I was filming here from the rich area so that people can see. I wanted people to see all of Haiti, not just the super pressed areas. Maybe we can. I'm afraid to put on. Oh, this is important actually. Let me play this. This is the Haitian leadership sending solidarity greetings to Black Lives Matter, and this is right in front of that voodoo center I was talking about. And then you see when you see like the straw hats and the headwear, that's the traditional voodoo culture. So they're talking about the struggle against a puppet dictatorship is the struggle against imperialism. And here, this is they give a shout out to the revolutionaries from around the world. So I'll play this one, and at the end they yell in Spanish, so you'll be able to understand something. So that doesn't need any translation.
Yeah. By the way, real quick, I just want to put it out there. I just thought about something. You know, we're ANTICONQUISTA is going to have a Diaspora Collective conference. So, you know, if folks are interested, if you're doing work out there, reach out to either myself or Professor Shaw. But I am part of this little subcommittee. So, you know, if folks are out there doing work and you'd like to get involved and you'd like to, you know, consider being a part of a collective, you know, hit me up. You know, you can find me on Facebook. You know, I'm at Sons of Fidel on Twitter. Definitely hit me up. You know, we're trying to build with folks.
100%. Well, all right, good. You know, good work tonight, Victor. I think we fulfilled our mission to try to get a microphone to who needs the microphone, the Haitian people. Who needs the reparations? Who needs the solidarity? The Haitian people. And yeah, Nestor, that's correct, Nestor. There's a reason I tried to film at different places. I say film like I'm some, you know, professional journalist. Film isn't I picked up my cell phone, but I'm by no means any type of real journalist. But these are the skills that we pick up as revolutionaries, and I'm just glad I could play whatever role, because people to people solidarity, these Haitian organizations, this Haitian revolutionary leadership, they're best positioned to rebuild Haiti. The true earthquake was not the 2010 natural disaster. It was the colonial earthquake, the earthquake of white supremacy, the earthquake of imperialism that rendered Haiti susceptible and vulnerable to natural disaster, because we've seen earthquakes hit Oakland and San Francisco in 1989, similar to what hit Haiti, and how many people died? Maybe a few dozen, maybe a few hundred. Well, how come so many Haitians died? Well, because of what imperialism has done to them for so long. So the fundraiser is there to be in touch with these revolutionaries. They're the ones best positioned to organize Haiti, to rebuild Haiti. That's why the NGOs exist. The NGOs exist so that they can try to cipher off the solidarity into these dead-end charities. And that's what I think a lot of our people in the U.S., a lot of Americans don't understand that. And their intentions are good when they give $5, $10, $50. But who are you giving it to? Most of that, the UN, the Red Cross, it doesn't go to the Haitian people. It's just another bloated bureaucracy. So I'll take us out, Victor. Shout out to everybody. Yeah, Nestor.
Shout out to the audience. Shout out to my Haitian brothers and sisters. And to the folks out there who support us, we appreciate y'all. You know what I mean? Study, observation, and participation, as Fred Hampton used to say. Get yourself some books, get yourself some guns, join an anti-imperialist organization, and, you know, make sure you get involved, man. We appreciate y'all supporting us.
100%. And we'll end with a few of the videos. And like every week, we say, fieles siempre, traidores nunca, venceremos. Always faithful to the struggle, never sell out. All power to the people, we shall overcome.
¡Viva el socialismo! ¡Patria muerte! ¡Venceremos!
You're listening to Sons of Fidel on ANTICONQUISTA with Victor Coronado and Danny Shaw. Sons of Fidel is a platform for the voiceless and marginalized, oppressed and colonized peoples, the working class, Black and brown radicals, the LGBTQ community, and our allies in the struggle against imperialism. Please note, the views expressed by the hosts or guests of Sons of Fidel may not necessarily reflect the views of ANTICONQUISTA.